Welcome back to Frame Analysis, where I analyze a frame, let you guys know what it can do, and help you to make an informed decision on whether or not the grind for this frame is or is not worth it. Today we're going to be going over the poster child for Warframe, Excalibur. Excalibur, or as I'll refer to him from now on, Excal, is a damage-oriented frame, and the only damage-oriented frame you can start the game with. Excal's damage, though limited until you get Exalted Blade out, is actually pretty decent. Once again, this frame does show his age in his kit, and he is fairly old. He has a dash that deals a respectable amount of damage, but nothing to write home about, and he has a room clearing ability with limitations rather than it being infinite like some other newer frames. He was also the first frame to be gifted something called an Exalted Weapon, so before we get into his kit, we will need to go over this unique weapon, Exalted Blade. Exalted Blade is Excal's weapon that he will have no matter what, and it does not take up your melee slot. It is used in tandem with his 4, and has some unique synergies with his 1. This weapon has its own stance which cannot be changed and is fully moddable, which means that its damage can be further increased by expanding your arsenal. Exalted Blade is a slash weapon, which means that when you mod it, you will want to focus more on your slash modifiers than any other type of modifier. This is due to the way that mods scale. When a mod said 100% slash, it effectively doubles your slash, not increases by 100. This means a 100% slash mod is several times more valuable than a 100% impact or puncture. Modding this, I would focus more on slash and status rather than the crit. Now, with Exalted Blade out of the way, let's get into his abilities. Excalibur's passive enables him to increase attack speed and gives bonus damage while wielding any of the following melee weapons: swords, dual swords, nikanas, rapiers, and of course, his Exalted Blade. Currently, two-handed nikanas are not part of this, though that could be changed in the future, and if I'm being honest, I don't think they will. A slight aside, I see a lot of complaints about Excalibur's passive not including these, and I don't understand why it would. If you look at all of the other weapons that are contained within his passive, they are held in one hand. Dual swords are held one sword per hand, nikanas one hand, rapiers one hand, and swords are all one hand. Two-handed nikanas wouldn't fit his theme very well in my opinion, but with that brief segue over, personally I think this passive is one of the more strong ones, which is why I'm going over it, being it's a 10% attack speed and a 10% damage buff. Once again, these are percent buffs, and they are fairly huge given how percent scaling works in this game. A 10 flat buff would be next to useless, but because it's 10%, it is fairly strong. Slash Dash is Excal's first ability, and it reads, dash between enemies while slashing with the Exalted Blade. This, upon testing, does not actually slash with the Exalted Blade for a strike and uses the base damage on the ability for the damage, meaning the ability screen is lying to you, and you should not really use this ability for its damage, more for its gap closing potential once you need to spread out during boss fights. Unfortunately, this means that its damage will suffer, as you generally won't be building a lot of damage on Excal, as the damage on his 4 does not scale off of it, and his 4 is his best ability. Now the unique thing about his first ability is that if you have the 4th ability active, Exalted Blade, the slash will swing the sword, sending Exalted Blade's beam forward. This is the only real way to use Excal's 1 when fighting, is to keep the blade out, which you generally want to do anyway, and use the dash to go through a group of enemies. But because the beam fires off of normal melee attacks anyway, there isn't really a need to do this, as the beam penetrates everything including terrain, so it's just better to melee attack for the beam proc instead of using his ability, which costs energy, which is an important resource in this game. Excal's second ability is Radial Blind, or Radial Howl. As, and here's a minor spoiler alert for the story, I will leave a timestamp that you can skip to where I'll be done talking about this ability. If you do the story, you'll get a free upgraded Excal called Excalibur Umbra, which has Radial Howl instead of Radial Blind. The two abilities are essentially the same, so I'll go over them both right now. The Blind, or Stun, everyone in the radius. And if you have Umbra, it will shed sentience resistances, which is unique because to my knowledge, he is the only frame with this ability. The other issue with this ability is that it scales off of range, which you do not really build on him. When you're building Excalibur, which I will get into later, efficiency and duration are some of your best friends. This means running negative range is not only possible, but it's more than likely going to be the case because of the plus-minus mods existing. Radial Blind is a decent ability, as is Radial Howl of course, but I don't see using them as a super viable way to play Excalibur. Radial Javelin is the cause of a map rework, so I can't really say that it's all bad, but since that rework, Radial Javelin has not seen a lot of use and is fairly outclassed by his fourth ability. Radial Javelin shoots out 12 javelins at nearby enemies, dealing damage and impaling them into walls. These javelins can penetrate mobs to hit other mobs. Back in the day, there was a set build called Radial Javelin Excalibur, or RJ Excal for short. You would go onto the map Draco, stand in the center with a max range, max power, and spam Radial Jav. And this would kill just about everything in the room. The issue was you used to run out of energy, so to combo it, this was enabled by an Energy Vampire Trinity, or EV Trin, who would perpetually gift you energy by having slightly more range and casting Energy Leech on enemies at a greater distance than your javelins. D didn't take too much issue with this until players started extorting other players for carries to max rank their weapons. The way that experience works in this game is once you go into a mission with other people, when they kill something, you will be gifted some of the experience as long as you are within experience range. So taking a Radial Javelin Excalibur and having him sit in the middle of the map to spam things was generally a fun pastime for some, but a genuine money-making tool for others. D didn't really like this, so they reworked the map to be a defense map, which made it so that it was fairly impossible due to the way that enemies spawned. A lot of people believe that D would have reworked the map regardless of this, but I would like to point out Hydron and Sedna. Those maps have been notoriously used to level weapons quickly, and DE could not care less about them. It was, in my opinion, the player base that kind of ruined this fun by getting greedy and trying to extort other players for carries. That's neither here nor there. Since the map rework, RJ Excals have fallen off the face of the earth, and the build is not really viable, in my opinion. For Excal's fourth ability, he pulls out his Exalted Blade and equips it as his melee, meaning he can normal attack, heavy attack, and all that fun stuff. The blade fires a wave in front of you that doesn't require a line of sight, doesn't stop on first enemy hit, can crit, and can apply status. On a slide attack, this will blind enemies in a nearby radius that scales with your range, but once again you do not build range on Excalibur. Here is Excalibur's bread and butter. This is why most, if not everyone, starts picking up Excal in the beginning. He's the best frame for trash clearing that you can get in this early period. However, for each second you have Exalted Blade out, it drains energy from you, but this can be mitigated by running duration, so that 2.5 energy per second cost can be lowered. Mine sits at roughly a 0.5 or a 0.67 depending on my build. I essentially start the mission with my blade out and don't have to put it back unless I really get unlucky and don't get any energy orbs off of most of the enemies. You don't need to build power strength on him because the blade has mods on it for its own scaling, so you can sacrifice power and range since the blade's reach does not have its own range scaling, and the only thing that really scales with the range is the blind, and that'll leave you more room for efficiency and duration to make the cost of casting it cheap and the cost of keeping it out cheap, since drain on abilities scales with efficiency and duration. In conclusion, Excalibur is a decent frame, nothing to write home about, but he brings some unique things to the table, especially for someone who's just starting out. Unique mechanics compounded with decent damage and fun modding compatibility means that you'll actually have to think a little bit while using this frame, and if you do think in the pre-lobby and make decent loadouts, he should come out okay and deal decent amounts of damage in your missions. I do recommend either taking him as a starter or farming him out at your earliest convenience. However, if you just start hard farming the story, you'll get the better one for free. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and don't forget to join the Discord if you'd like to chat, and I'll see you all in the next video.